been confirmed, along with 411 back from a German lab. The total number of confirmed cases here now stands at 12,547. Chief Medical Officer Dr. Tony Holohan outlines the details behind the 38 deaths.
29 of them are in the east of the country, 6 in the west and 3 in the south. 22 of them are male and 16 were female, and the median age among those was 84, and of those 38 we were informed that 28 have an underlying medical condition.
Oasis and Warehouse have collapsed into administration after takeover talks with prospective buyers broke down. Any possible sale of the outlets was affected by the outbreak of COVID-19. The move affects 248 Irish employees at 13 stores and 29 concession stands, some of which were located in the recently closed Debenhams. And the World Health Organization says it's getting on with the job of tackling COVID-19 despite funding from the US being put on hold. Donald Trump's accused the body of severely mismanaging its response to the pandemic. Taoiseach Simon Coveney's called it indefensible. Director General of the WHO, Tedros Ghebreyesus, says they regret the move.
The United States of America has been a long-standing and generous friend to WHO, and we hope it will continue to be so.
That's it for now. More in an hour.
News Talk Weather.
Thanks to the AA. To help in these challenging times, we've reduced the cost of our car insurance. Get our lowest price at the AA.ie.
Dry tonight with some mist and fog in places. Lowest temperatures of 0 to 4 degrees. And now you're up to date on News Talk.
Off the ball. This is News Talk.
Now then, you're very welcome along. Tonight's show, special Wednesday Night Rugby coming your way. He played 139 times for Australia between 1994 and 2007. He is a World Cup winner. He was part of the team which beat the Lions in 01. So Keith Wood and myself will be talking to the legendary George Gregan. That is between 8 and 9 this evening. George Gregan on the way. Elsewhere, this hour, Ken Doherty is going to pick out his favourite Champions League game. And it seems Mike Ashley finally selling Newcastle. So we will check in with John Anderson between 9 and 10. 53106 is the text number. As ever, do get in touch. We are at Off the Ball on Twitter. Richie McCormack is standing by. Hello.
How are you, Joe? How are you?
Very well. How are you doing?
Not too bad. Not too bad. Trying to keep away from the sun, such is my perilous position by the window here.
Wearing his Trinidad and Tobago jersey is Nathan Murphy.
Not staying away from the sun.
No, a touch of rouge there off the forehead, I would say, Nathan.
A quick game of first to 20 in the last hour.
First to 20. Oh, first to 20.
I am going to end up in A&E at some stage before this is over.
Do they still play 3 and in?
No, 3 and in just doesn't satisfy them anymore.
Okay.
It's first to 20. It's a good 40-minute workout.
Well, I would say. So there's a few things to get through. OTBAM coming at you every morning, 7:30. With Ger and Owen and Tommy. This morning, they had another addition to the OTB Culture Hall of Fame. This morning, they were joined by Stephanie Preisner, writer, columnist, can't cope, won't cope. And they were talking about an issue close to my heart, US office versus original Ricky Gervais office. Here's a little sample.
The UK office ran out of steam because the US office was successful once it took off from the UK office. Once it stopped doing what the UK office was, which was, it was depressing, and it was about these characters who are stuck in a kind of purgatory for years on end, longing for something different but never finding it. And where the American one took that and made it hopeful, we went with them. But there's nothing more depressing than watching depressed people stay in a depressing setting and find it depressing. But it was the hope and the joy that allowed us to go on for 8 seasons or however many there were with the US office. So yeah, I mean, it was a springboard, but it was a really depressing springboard that no one wanted to continue watching. I didn't. But then I also find Ricky Gervais incredibly depressing.
Well, I can see why you would definitely, you know, if you look at these two, if you look at the people behind the two.
The UK office ran out of steam because the US office was successful once it took off from the UK office. Once it stopped doing what the UK office was, which was, it was depressing, and it was about these characters who are stuck in a kind of purgatory for years on end, longing for something different but never finding it. And where the American one took that and made it hopeful, we went with them. But there's nothing more depressing than watching depressed people stay in a depressing setting and find it depressing. But it was the hope and the joy that allowed us to go on for 8 seasons or however many there were with the US office. So yeah, I mean, it was a springboard, but it was a really depressing springboard that no one wanted to continue watching. I didn't. But then I also find Ricky Gervais incredibly depressing.
Well, I can see why you would definitely, you know, if you look at these two, if you look at the people behind the two characters, they are very different. Like, I don't think Ricky Gervais is acting that much when he's doing David Brent. I mean, obviously he'll say he is, but like in public, he doesn't. He seems he didn't have to channel too hard. There wasn't too much chiseling away of his own gruff exterior to find David Brent right there. And I can see why. But I remember when that dropped first, it was so out there and different from everything else, and it was such a singular work versus anything that we'd ever seen. Like, bear in mind, this is dropping on the BBC. Like, everybody's watching it, and it felt like a transgression, and I think it deserves extra credit for that. That maybe when you watch the two of them now, it's kind of like everybody goes, Citizen Kane, such an amazing movie. And you watch it and you go, oh, what the hell? Then you realize that actually this is the first time anybody's done any of this stuff. Really, I'm not saying that nobody's ever done mockumentary, but.
And I think, you know, like Now TV have Parks and Recreation on there, which is a huge, which I think is hugely inspired by The Office, because this was one of the first mockumentary style things. I'm just saying that it is not, you know, The Godfather Part 2 is objectively better than The Godfather Part 1, and the US Office is objectively better than the UK Office, even though its genome and its DNA is entwined with it. But it was and Ricky Gervais continued to be an executive producer. He even features in the US Office, so he's not like, you know, sitting in a corner eating moldy bread crying that he lost a good thing. He also recognized that the US Office was better than the UK, I think.
Stephanie Preisner there, talking to Owen and Ger this morning on the latest OTB Culture Hall of Fame. It's now on offtheball.com. It's on YouTube, Facebook, and it is there with thanks to Now TV. Watch whatever you're in the mood for on Now TV. Richie McCormack, I suspect you have watched both. Give us the verdict. Can I start the ball rolling here by saying we're talking about two really, really good pieces of work?
That's the thing. This is like trying to, basically it's two completely different houses that have been built on foundations that look exactly the same. And both of them are very much livable. And one of them is one that you might want to return to more often. And I think that's specifically because there's more of it. As Stephanie mentioned there, The Office ran out of steam after its two series. I don't mean that in a sense of its material. It was more a sense of where it could go had it reached its end point, whereas the US Office basically aped the UK one for the first series and then split off into its own fantastical world surrounding even Michael Scott, which is Steve Carell's character. But I think like you're fully entitled to enjoy both of them. But I'd go along with Stephanie in that I'd go back to more regularly the US one, because I think there's more there. It's a lighter watch. It's a more enjoyable watch. And the characters that are in it become very, very different to the ones we're exposed to in Wernham Hogg in Slough.
Yeah, they're completely different shows, really, with completely different turns, courtesy of Steve Carell and Ricky Gervais. Nathan, were you an Office man?
I watched the English version and I liked it, which I think is sort of even sacrilege to say I just liked it. It's one of those TV programs that if you watched it, you need to know every single scene and be able to repeat it word for word when you're in company. Whereas I just can't. I watched it, I enjoyed it, and I sort of moved on. And I watched a couple of episodes of the American one, and again, I just didn't get it. I can understand, and you would expect, actually, I would imagine that the American Office should be better, because they've done the English Office. They've realized, I know it's a different audience, but they sort of have a good idea of what works, what doesn't, things they would like to change. So therefore, it's not a sequel, surely it should be automatically a better product. But I have to sit in the fence on it. It never affected my life massively. I was more emotionally connected at that stage to something like Scrubs, hard-hitting stuff.
I lived for the
Scrubs is
final.
great,
I lived for the final few moments of Scrubs when things got sentimental. That bit of heart that Scrubs had. I mean, the US office had a touch more heart than the UK office. I'd be very split. I could be in, I could be in the mood for
I don't know
either.
if that's true. I don't know if that's true. On the Hearts thing, I was actually going to single out the UK one because the Tim and Dawn story arc, when that reaches its crescendo in the Christmas special, I mean, that just rips your heart out and it's just dance along with it. Whereas I don't think the US one reaches anything close to that peak, even with Pam and Jim. I don't think they're comparable. I think the height that it brings you emotionally in the UK office is far superior to what they do in the US. But what they do in the US better than the UK one is to make you laugh more consistently.
Well, they certainly make you laugh more. I found myself liking the Jim and Pam characters more than Don and Tim, isn't it? Don and Tim?
Yeah,
for whatever reason.
Our old colleague Oisin Langan brought up an excellent point earlier on when this was going out on OTBM. He said that there was a piece put out recently that suggested that with the relationship between Jim and Dwight, and therefore Garrett and Tim, was one of a bullying one from the so-called cooler character and taking advantage of a slightly more innocent person in the likes of Garrett/Dwight.
But that's more of an English thing and probably an Irish thing, the bullying, more sinister thing, I would suggest, you know.
It's one of our greatest qualities.
Well, I mean, we are here to tear each other down. That's just what we do.
Should spend some time in the OTB office and see what it's like out there.
I'm kind of getting in the mood for watching some of The Office back. I need to make a more informed judgment. But you can watch that full chat from this morning in all the usual places. Now, to kick things off from a sporting perspective, Richie, your news round starts with word from the GAA, courtesy of Alan Milton. So maybe a bit more of a picture about what we can expect from the GAA Championship.
Yeah, the Super 8 qualifiers in football and the round-robin format in hurling are set to be axed under any revised GAA championship structure. There will be that special congress held via video link on Friday, and the GAA's Director of Communications, Alan Milton, has been outlining what may come next to Off the Ball. Milton admits that they can't host any inter-county action until July at the earliest due to the coronavirus pandemic, and he would also like to avoid a straight knockout format.
I think the first thing that it will fall under threat, surely because there won't be enough weekends to play. It will be the group stages of the quarterfinals in football and the group stages in the provincial championships in hurling, namely in Leinster and Munster. There just won't be sufficient weekends. People have asked us about straight knockout scenarios. Again, that's another thing you would probably leave further down the list if you could.
So somewhere in between is what we're hearing there, Nathan.
To be honest, I just don't see a point of a championship if you can't have crowds there. This is not a professional sport. So you can see why the GAA are looking at it. We need to get some games played in terms of getting some revenue in. They're probably facing a hit of, if you look at last year's figures, somewhere close to 30 million if there's no attendances at all at inter-county games. And they have a rights deal worth somewhere, 11, 12 million that they want to try and satisfy as much of as possible and get in whatever revenue they can. But these are not professional players. What is the point of playing inter-county games if there's nobody there? What's the point of an All-Ireland final if there's nobody there? With my usual green and red hat on, imagine if Mayo won an All-Ireland final this year at an empty Croke Park and you couldn't have a homecoming.
Imagine if Mick McCarthy wins the Euros. Sorry, what?
It would be worthless. But it would be and that goes for every county.
Yeah.
What is the prize on offer? Like, it's the GAA, because of its amateur ethos, it's about the glory. It's about the day, the memories. Like, there is no financial reward for the players. So why would they go out there and potentially put themselves at risk? I'm assuming the GAA, and the way they're talking, they're going to wait as long as possible, so there is no risk. But what's the benefit to players? What's the motivation for players? Like, you're representing your county, but nobody's ever going to see it, aside from people watching on television.
Which is maybe the vast majority of people who would see it, even if there were crowds there, you could argue. I mean, you would have 1 to 1.5 million people watching that All-Ireland final. It would be eerie and strange, but I would take it over nothing. I guess the argument might be, if you're a player and you're nearing a certain age, you want to participate. If you're a young player, you want to participate. If you're only in inter-county football for 6-7 years of your life, you want that 1 year. Of course you do, because it's a valuable piece of real estate over the course of your career. So I think the players would be up for it, just to return to normality and have a crack at winning something. Would it not be ideal? Totally accept that. On the money front, I mean, you can still generate a fair amount of income via advertising. You've got the boarding around the pitches. You've got the various stakeholders who I'm sure want their ads there in full picture and TV audiences. And I think there's a ton of reasons to go ahead with it, to be honest. Just finding the right format. Well, I do accept it would be very strange, especially if it was a novel All-Ireland winner on All-Ireland final day with no crowd there. But I do suspect we're all going to get very used to sport behind closed doors very, very quickly. And the alternative is nothing. You know, maybe that's one of the stronger arguments as well. Like, I think that is the strongest.
I think that's the strongest argument, is that if it's this or nothing, we'll sort of go with anything, it feels like, at this stage. I just think because of the amateur side of it, like Premier League, all of this are a totally different scenario, whereby the TV revenue and there's so many livelihoods at stake because of that. It's always going to get back as soon as it can.
Yeah.
But when do you start a GAA championship? What sort of championship is it going to be? Even listening to Alan Milton there, like, club game is going to come first. Like, club players will want their day in the sun. They'll want to get back out playing as well. So, like, is it a straight 32-team knockout competition that's run over 5 weeks in all the games at an empty Crow Park?
Potentially. I guess it depends on when we can get started. That's the issue, isn't it? How many? I guess once we know how many weekends we have, we can make a schedule of some kind. But I think, yeah, I mean, increasingly as the months, and it now is turning into months, go by, I think the sooner we can get back to any of that stuff, we should. Once it's safe, once it's not putting a strain on the scant health resources we have already. But I'm all for it. I'm all for it. I would have sympathy if a Mayo won an All-Ireland this year in an empty Crow Park. It wouldn't be the ideal.
Having a Zoom celebration from McHale Park on the Monday night.
Yeah.
An empty
84,000 people on it. Stop shouting.
On the theme, Rich, of empty stadiums, so Dr. Fauci, we've got used to him standing behind Donald Trump of late, and whenever Trump says something ridiculous, you can tell because Fauci's eyes start darting around the room to see if anybody else has registered just how ridiculous the statement has been made. So he has had his say on sport in the US.
Yeah, let's just remind ourselves, he's the director of the US Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases. He's suggested that stadiums will remain empty, players could be sequestered in hotels and tested regularly if sport is to return in the United States. Germany today extended its ban on mass gatherings to August 31st. And on OTBAM yesterday, Professor Luke O'Neill said antibody tests could be vital for a return to sport in this country. But speaking to Snapchat, Dr. Fauci has warned that such testing is still some way off.
You know, I'd like to give you a simple answer to it, but it isn't a simple answer. And the reason it's complicated is that, first of all, the antibody tests that are out there, disturbingly, most of them have not been validated by the FDA or the NIH. So we're not sure if they're really accurate. But let's say they were. The thing we don't know yet is what is the relationship between the level of antibody and the degree of your protection. So you may be positive for an antibody, but not enough to protect you, and then have that person put their guard down and wind up getting infected.
Richie, why is there a beatbox behind Dr. Fauci?
He's speaking to Snapchat. You need to have some beats behind you if you're talking to Snapchat. Snapchat's for the young people, much like Wu-Tang.
It's very hard to concentrate on what he said.
He basically said, we can't use antibody tests yet because we don't know how accurate they are. So you might have some level of antibody in your system, but not enough to resist the disease. So you might become susceptible to it or susceptible to passing it on somebody else.
I see. Okay. Because the antibody test is going to become the more crucial test very, very soon. Luke O'Neill was on OTBAM yesterday. He was talking about that as well. The sooner we can get to a point where you know you've had it and you have the antibodies and you're no longer contagious, you can be released into the economy and get things moving again. So if we can get to that stage pretty soon, then there is hope for sport, amongst other things. Do you, in the main, Nathan, are you pro getting back to sport behind closed doors? Because otherwise you're anti-sport for about 8-9 months yet.
I am, once it's safe for the people taking part and all the people around, which is a bit of this that's always ignored, that a match doesn't take place with just 30 players. There is any amount of officials that need to be there as well. And that we're not prioritising testing for sports people above people who need it. If all of that is in place, and like this has moved so quickly, we're still only a month, 5-6 weeks into this, that in 2 months' time, there's no reason why actually we can't be in a position where everybody is being tested and that all of those sort of concerns you have should be cleared up. But I don't think anyone is going to turn down any sport right now. Like the thought of 4 weeks of non-stop Premier League, Norwich against Watford, bring it on.
I'm not missing the Premier League that much, I have to say, in many respects. If they could just get on with a do-over, give Liverpool the league and start the thing up again, I'd be more up for that. I don't need to see the remaining fixtures of this year's edition.
No, I think they have to finish the season. I just don't understand why they wouldn't.
Oh no, they have to finish it. I just don't necessarily. I'm not aching to watch it. I'd rather get into next season. I want to watch Liverpool's title defence.
I want to see them win it first.
Aaron says, I've always felt Ricky Gervais, unlike Peter Kay, for instance, isn't sympathetic to his characters. There is little warmth. This is I really like Ricky Gervais, but I do agree with that. There is a lack of warmth to so much of what he does. We got a little glimpse of it, Richie, in Afterlife of late. Maybe he's maturing and is getting a bit more sentimental in his middle age. But there is very deliberate, I'm sure, because he's clearly a smart dude, he knows what he's doing. But there's a very deliberate lack of warmth to most of the worlds he creates. And I don't like hanging out in them all that much.
Yeah, me neither. It's something you can do, I guess, when you're of a certain age, and there is a certain age when I would have been more attracted to Ricky Gervais material than I would be now. But something interesting Ger said in his OTBAM clip was that everybody was watching this when it was on the BBC, which isn't necessarily true. Like, Gervais was on his way to having a second failure back to back, because he did a chat show on Channel 4 that was awful, and then did The Office, which didn't get viewed first time round, and by sheer quirk got repeated, and it was its repeats that gained its audience. So it's kind of just weird case of happenstance that he actually ended up being as popular and as big a figure and this huge totemic figure in comedy that he's become, because it was first time round just didn't do it for him.
Right, I didn't realise that. So Dundalk, and in particular Vinnie Perth, not happy with the FAI here.
No, yeah, Dundalk manager Vinnie Perth, he's voiced his frustration with an FAI approach for Rory Higgins. Perth's assistant is poised to join Stephen Kenny's Republic of Ireland backroom team. Higgins has been Perth's assistant for 16 months, having served as opposition analyst under Kenny at Oriel Park before that. Perth says he's unhappy with the manner of the approach. Higgins still under contract, so any severing of the ways with him and Dundalk would come with some compensation, it would seem.
Okay. I mean, so they would get compensation?
Yes.
Right. Is that not fair enough then? Is that not how the world works?
It seems whatever the manner is seems to be the issue here. Obviously, there's no way Rory Higgins is ever going to turn down the possibility, I think, of getting involved with the senior international side. It's whatever channels they went through. Clearly, Dundalk aren't happy about this. And, you know, maybe there's still a little bit of a hangover from Dundalk's point of view about when Stephen Kenny got the job. Yeah. And the lack of conversations that were held at that time and the lack of compensation that they ended up getting.
Okay. We might talk to Vinnie Perth about that at some stage. Meanwhile, Rich, more movement on Tour de France. We have a start date.
Yeah, we brought you the start date last night. The UCI have confirmed it today. It's been moved back to start in late August. The World Road Race Championships are going to take place immediately after the Tour. The rearranged Giro d'Italia and Vuelta a España will then follow the Worlds. The Tour will begin in Nice on August 29th and finish on the Champs-Élysées on September 20th. Race director Christian Prudhomme claimed today that some teams would have gone out of business if the race had been cancelled.
Bournemouth then?
Yeah, they've become the latest Premier League club to reverse the decision to put some non-playing staff on temporary leave. They followed Liverpool and Tottenham in deciding against making use of the British government's coronavirus job retention scheme. Bournemouth manager Eddie Howe was the first top-flight boss to voluntarily agree to reduce his salary during the pandemic. They say they reversed their furloughing decision after listening to their fans.
Now, this next story, I can promise you fireworks from Nathan Murphy on the football show. He's going to deep dive into the ills of Scottish football of late, and it's juicy. I can tell you that. It's hot stuff, Nathan. It's really good.
Hey, Joe, you ain't getting that IMRO Radio Award back after this, I can tell you.
I genuflect before the Scottish segment coming up on the football show, but you can preview it first now, Richie.
Yeah, an agreement has been reached to end the Scottish Championship, League One and League Two seasons early due to the coronavirus pandemic. It means that Dundee United have been crowned champions of the second tier, Raith Rovers and Cove Rangers winning their respective divisions. However, the SPFL are yet to confirm if those sides will be promoted and clubs at the bottom of their tables relegated. The resolution was passed after Dundee changed their vote on the proposal to yes, meaning teams will now receive their end of season payments.
Any last story or two you want to squeeze in before you wrap up?
Do you know what? We'll finish on somewhat of a good news story. Jimmy Greaves released from hospital today after treatment for an unspecified problem. A statement from the family said the former striker was back at home recuperating celebrating with his wife, adding he had been very ill. Jimmy's son Danny has thanked the NHS, who treated Tottenham's record goal scorer.
Very good. Jimmy Greaves in John Giles's all-time Spurs 11 last week. John Giles doing the all-time Arsenal 11 tomorrow alongside Nathan. Nathan, you're back for the football show. We'll talk to you then. Cheers for now.
Yeah.
Richie?
Jimmy Greaves comes up every month with John Giles, Joe, and the second his name comes up, John Giles says, genius.
Genius.
Leave it at that.
Richie McCormack, thank you.
Mind yourself, lads.
We have George Gregan, between 8 and 9, World Cup winner with Australia. Myself and Keith Wood talking to George Gregan. In the meantime, Ken Doherty is picking out his favourite Champions League game.
Some of the boys are really obsessed with me, and some of them, they will wake up in the morning. As always, the first thing they think that comes to their